Alright, so I'm Anna Pollard. I am a G1 grad student in the clinical psychology program at CSPP. I'm a writing tutor at the academic center at Alliant International University. We're just going to go over some basics on APA formatting. So to begin, what is APA style? So according to the American Psychological Association, the citation style is the most commonly used format to cite sources in psychology, education, and social sciences. So the function of this formatting is primarily for stylistics, in-text citations, and references. So we'll go over examples on those. Some general APA guidelines. So just for the sake of a research paper, there is 12-point font, Times New Roman, double-spaced, 1-inch margins on 8.5 by 11 paper. Typically your essay will include the following sections: your title page, abstract, main body, and references. And we'll go in more depth on APA formatting about those sections. So your title page should include a page header where it says, for example, running head, colon, and the title of your paper in all capital letters. It cannot exceed over 50 characters with spaces. Your following pages after your title page will not have the words running head. It'll just have your title in all capital letters. Your title is on your title page. The title is in the center, all caps, and it should be on the upper half of the page. And you'll have the name of your art or name of your research paper, your name, and the university. Every other page should include again that page header, and in the upper left, all in caps, and your page number in the upper right after the title page. So we'll start with the abstract. The abstract will begin on its own separate page, and it will have the title abstract, no bold or other formatting. It is common for students sometimes to want to make things fancy, having different fonts, bolding, italicizing. To stick with APA formatting, it is according to the manual to have it only as abstract, not bolded, not italicized. You'll begin with the next line with a concise summary of the key points of your research. And you will not indent the first line of that abstract. So for the abstract, it generally includes your research topic, research questions, participants, methods, results, data analysis, and conclusions, and generally ranges from 150 to 250 words. And sometimes it might not include all those topics depending on the type of research paper this is, but generally these are the components for your abstract. So for your references page, the title references will be at the top of the page, centered, not bolded. Each reference will be double-spaced, organized alphabetically by the last name. We'll go in depth to that if there is a citation or reference that does not include the author. We'll go over some examples of what you would start with to keep it alphabetical and in order on your reference page. The first line of each reference is to the left, and then the next lines in the references are tabbed in once. So we'll go over an example here for what a reference will look like. You'll first have your author's last name, the first initial of their first name, and sometimes you can also include their first and middle name. It's not necessary, but some people do add that. For the title of the article, you only capitalize the first letter and the subtitle. So for example, in this one, the title was Friendship, Quality, and Social Development, so just the F on friendship is capitalized. If you were to have a title that says something along the lines of substance abuse, systematic review, you would have S on substance abuse capitalized, and then a systematic review, the A, and then R on reference, or S on systematic review would be capitalized. So just a note here, the APA manual provides many examples of how to cite common types of sources. It does not provide rules on how to cite all types of sources. So therefore, if you have a source that APA does not include, they suggest finding examples that are most similar to your source. There's more information again in the manual, publication manual of the American Psychological Association, which is a manual that is available in the writing center, in the tutoring center, as well as there are examples that we'll talk about a resource called Purdue OWL, where different kind of resources maybe such as presentations or different types other than articles. If there's some that might seem kind of confusing on how to cite it, there's some specific examples on that site. So all lines again after the first line of each reference list should be indented 1/2 inch from the left margin. The author's names are inverted, so last name then first. And generally you'll only give the last name and then the initials for the first name. So you'll do that for up to 7 authors. If the work has more than 7 authors, you'll list the first 6 authors and use ellipses after the 6th author's name. After the ellipses, you'll list the author's name of the work. So let's say we have 10 authors. You'll list the first 6, put your ellipses, and then you'll put that last author that's in that list. Let's say there's 10 of them. You'll list that one indicating that there are authors in between, indicating that there are more than 6 authors. Again, the reference list is in alphabetical order. And for multiple articles by the same author or authors that are listed in the same order, be sure you list their entries in chronological order from earliest to most recent. And you also want to write the journal title in full. So some of these tips and guidelines are from Purdue OWL, which is a resource, again, we'll talk about later. So you want to maintain the punctuation and capitalization that is used by the journal. So for example, if the journal is written as capital R, lowercase e, and then call is all in capital letters, you want to maintain exactly what they have. And so then you'll also want to capitalize all major words in journal titles as comparison to the title of an article where you would only do the first letter of the first word of the title. When you want to reference books, chapters, articles, or web pages, capitalize only the first letter of the first word of a title, as mentioned before, and then the first word after a colon, as mentioned earlier, if it says substance abuse, colon, a systematic review. You also want to italicize titles of longer works, such as books and journals. Do not italicize, underline, or put quotes around the titles of shorter works, such as journal articles or essays in edited collections. All right. So when you're also, this is kind of some questions to ask yourself when you're making this reference list. What type of source it is. If it is a journal article, web page, or a book, also look at, can I get this reference from an online journal or from the source itself? So let's say if you gathered it from the database PsycInfo, you also want to find possibly what journal it came from and not just the database. You want to also, as I mentioned earlier, if there are some examples that might seem confusing or unique that aren't typical, like journal articles or chapters in a book, and you're not sure, mirroring the examples that are on Purdue OWL will be very helpful just to see kind of what other resources are cited like. You want to make sure your references are organized again by last name, alphabetically, and the subsequent lines of each reference are indented. Okay, so in-text citations. So the purpose of these in-text citations is so that any information that is written in an article that is not of your knowledge, that you're able to cite where that statement came from. You want to help readers locate the cited source. So when you have 2 options. You can do at the end of a quote or talking about the source in parentheses, including the name, year publication, and page number. So for example, this writer wrote, she stated, comma, students often had difficulty using APA style. And so they'll list the author, the year publication, and the page number. Page number is not necessarily always required. It is just an additional resource to indicate where that was found in the article. But she did not offer an explanation as to why. You can also include the in-text citation by doing this example for number 2, where you'll say according to Jones, so that is your author, and then parentheses, publication year, APA style's difficult citation format for first-time learners. Or you can include it at the end of your sentence as done in the second example. So when we have direct quotes, want to introduce a quote with a single phrase, include the author's name, year of publication, and additional, if you would like, you can add the page number. You want to keep that citation brief and do not repeat information. So in this example, they put, Jones found students often had difficulty using APA style. What implications does this have for teachers? So when they did this, this was a quote that they found they were not able maybe to paraphrase. Generally, there are ways to paraphrase in ways that you may not have to do a direct quote. Possibly indirect quotes might more include statistics, specific findings, anything that it may be more challenging to paraphrase would be in direct quotes and include your parenthetical reference. So if you want to introduce quotes with a single phrase, for example, you will put example according to Nielsen, year, comma, and then you'll include that direct quote. These are kind of just some like transition phrases to use to indicate that you're going to include a direct quote. You can use words like acknowledged, concluded, maintained, responded, contended, argued, reported, those types of phrases as well to indicate that this is not your own knowledge, that this is gathered from another resource. So remember to use verbs in the past tense for things that occurred in the past and present if you're talking about what is still occurring. That is important to keep cohesive throughout a paper to indicate what has been done and what is still in the works, to keep that throughout the paper.
Excuse me, is like direct quote, its page number is necessary?
Not necessarily. That's just an additional if they want to indicate where they found that quote. It is required to have the last name and the year publication. So if you have two or more works for in-text citation, so in this case, we have two different authors and two different studies. So that when the parenthetical citations include more than one author of different works, order them alphabetically by last name, author's name and year publication separated by a semicolon. So again, Johnson's a common last name, so we want to be sure that we still indicate that these are two different authors and two different studies. If the direct quote or the information that was provided has possibly, let's say you're talking about two different claims and contradictions in the field possibly of some topic, you want to be sure that you're talking about who had this article or who said this and who said the other, and if they have the same last name, you want to be sure you indicate which one was which. In this case, it sounds like it would be, if they were to have in the same parenthetical reference, it would be if they both possibly are indicating the same finding. So maybe if you're trying to talk about both these authors have found the same trends in some form of construct. Does that answer your question? Okay. So if you have 3 to 5 authors, you want to identify all authors in the single phrase or in the parentheses. So you will want to list the last name. Sometimes they will they'll incorporate the first initial, but if you have 3 to 5, you'll list the last names in order of what the article presents. And then following after you have, so if you have 3 to 5 authors, the first time you will list all 3 authors in that parenthetical reference. In the following citations, you'll list it as Nielsen et al. In this example to indicate that that is the reference and it came from the previous statement that was written by the study Nielsen, Roberts, and Pierce. By having et al., it just kind of tells the reader, oh, this is that same study. It just didn't need to list all 3 authors again. If you have 6 or more authors, you identify the first author's name followed by et al. Generally, you won't list all 6 the first time either. You'll just do that the first time. You can list it all in the parentheses, or you can introduce it with the author et al. And then the parentheses, the year of publication. Maintain that, whatever that content of that finding is. If there's an unknown author, you want to cite the first word of the title, followed by the year of publication in parentheses. So if we're incorporating for example, according to BBC Brain Story, and then you would have your parentheses, your publication, or you could list that content and then cite it as BBC, 2005, which is the year of publication. According to Purdue OWL's website, a resource on APA style citations, when your essay includes parenthetical citations of sources with no author named, use a shortened version of the source's title instead of an author's name. So use quotation marks and italics as appropriate. So for example, if they were talking about a certain word and its definition was according to Merriam-Webster, Merriam-Webster is the dictionary, so they italicize for their reference. You could also, you would write it as Merriam-Webster's Collegiate Dictionary, the edition, and then parentheses, the year of publication, and then you would list the city, state, and the organization. So that's kind of like how that would be listed in a references section. Okay, so if we want to cite an organization, mention organization the first time you cite the source in the single phrase or the parenthetical citation. So for example, if we want to say that the data collected by the Drug Administration, you want to say that organization, but also indicate when that was said or when that was published. So in this case, 2013 confirmed that. If the organization has a well-known abbreviation, in the abbreviation in parentheses, the first time the source is cited, and then only use the abbreviation in the future sentences. And that's important with any writing. If there is common in psychology, there's a lot of abbreviations such as CBT for cognitive behavioral therapy. There is different other abbreviations like ACT for acceptance and commitment therapy. It is important that you explain what that is at the beginning, because not necessarily every reader is going to know what that acronym stands for. So it's important to first start with Food Drug Administration, parentheses FDA, and then with the following of the article, you could just say FDA argues that, because now that your reader knows what FDA stands for. So if you have the same last name and author, we talked about this earlier, we want to be sure that we're giving each author the credit they deserve. So there's some common last names out there, like as we mentioned earlier, Johnson, and then in this case we have Roberts. You want to be sure that you, if they have the same name, use first initials with the last names, so that even in your parenthetical references that you're indicating that it was two different studies by two different authors. And if we only list Roberts, then that might indicate it's the same author, just two different articles. If you're citing two or more works by the same author and published in the same year, you want to use the lowercase letters A, B, and C after the year of publication to order the references. So if you were to put Roberts, parentheses, 2014 A, study of cats indicates, that would indicate that you're talking about the first study that was listed. If there's three, like for example, if you have A, B, and C, he has three different articles that are out and you're using all three in your study. If you have them in order from most recent to, in order of chronological order, sorry, you want to be sure that you indicate which article you're talking about for him. So this is an example for in-text citation for personal communication. If you're citing interviews, letters, emails of those sorts, include the communicator's name, the fact that it was personal communication, and the date of communication. So in this example, we have E. Lyon also claimed, and then have your statement that he said, and you want to put parentheses, personal communication, the date, and the year. Or another example you could do is just having the statement, and then the rest of, you have your statement, and then put who the communication was with, comma, personal communication, and the date of that communication. These will not be listed on your references list, but this can be included in your content of a paper. So for electronic sources, if you want to cite an electronic document, whenever possible, cite the author, date, style. If electronic source lacks page numbers, locate and identify paragraph numbers or paragraph heading. Again, that's just additional information to show where the statement was found. It's more necessary to have just the author and the publication. But in this example, we have that where this finding was, and it's in Statistics 101, section, comma, paragraph 5.
Thank you.
All right, headings. So now we're kind of moving on towards the body of your paper. They're going to be, so when you have your participants might be a heading, methods, discussion, results, those type of headings that are in a research paper, those will be centered, bold-faced, uppercase, and lowercase headings. So you want to be sure that they are left aligned in bold, and you don't have them all in caps. And then you'll begin the body text after the period. And then if you have the title indented and italicized in the lowercase heading with a period, begin the body text after the period. So these are the types of heading levels that would occur in a research paper and how you would format those. So in a lot of research articles, they will include tables. So this is how you would format a table in an APA format. You'll label the tables with numbers and provide a title. So in this example, they called it Table 1. The label and title appear on separate lines above the table, and they will have it to the left and single space. So the title of this table was Dog Scoring Above Average on Intelligence by Breed and Gender. You'll cite the source in a note below the table. So as we see here, we have that the image was from Purdue OWL, and that shows where the reference came from for that table. For figures, you want to label the figures with numbers and provide a title. The label and title appear on the same line below the figure. You might also add an additional title centered above the figure. So cite the source below the table and the title. An example here is Figure 1, Internet Users in Asia, adapted from the Asian Union Statistical Comparison by Jason Nielsen Statistical Books 2006, retrieved from www.stats.com. So this kind of shows, as we talked before, that below a figure they may include the reference of where that figure or table came from. So it's a lot of information. There's a manual for it, so that's good. But there's a good video that Purdue OWL does of a quick review of kind of what we talked about today. The site has a lot of excellent resources kind of for details. Sometimes if we have specific, maybe the authors aren't provided, or it's confusing on how many authors to list and we kind of forget those things, a good review is on this link. And so the manual looks like this. It's in the 6th edition. It's in our Writing Center. Other resources include the Hawk Writing on Moodle. And then we also have, again, writing tutors at the Writing Center at Alliant. And they are available to help with APA formatting, helping with the cohesiveness of cohesive writing styles, and kind of just being here as a resource to help the experience of writing research papers and essays a lot more easier, and being sure that we implement these APA formats and making that a lot more easier to understand. Questions or comments? Cool.